Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Friday, September 7th, 2018. A date that will live in infamy if you are George H.W. Bush, because, of course, I think at one point I don't know why this sticks in my memory, forgot or he mistook September 7th, because it sort of kind of sounds like December 7th, for Pearl Harbor Day. No big deal. Then he threw up on the Japanese prime minister. Was it? It was not, contemporaneous that he did all of this. That would have been a really huge insult, of course, to the Japanese, but they're okay with it. I have a very good relationship with their Prime Minister Shinzo, and I'll smooth it all over for you. All right. I don't know why that keeps coming to mind every September 7th. I remember that. Today is the day that George H.W. Bush accidentally thought was Pearl Harbor Day. It's not really a big deal. And he's, I think, probably still got it together a little more, mentally speaking, than our current president. But it's not entirely clear. It's never been entirely clear whether his son did or not. No, that's not rehabilitating his legacy. I can still have questions about, I'm not sure which one of them is the bigger dope. I'm not entirely sure. I have reevaluated W's mental capacity in light of the Trump presidency, if you want to call it that. And I guess I don't think it's rehabilitating his legacy to say, I think things were a little more stable under him, although the Iraqis would certainly say, gosh, we were getting murdered by the scores each day, maybe by the hundreds, and it wasn't any more stable for us. And that's true. I'm speaking only domestically. There weren't, for instance, daily publications of op-eds that said the president is out of his mind, signed his cabinet. That wasn't happening. However, there were daily op-eds saying the president is out of his mind, signed the dirty effing hippies, which then got us all punched, and we were all morons. And then 10 years later, we were right, but we were still morons because they were right first, even though they were wrong at the time, and changed their minds well after we told them they were wrong. But the thing is, they're them, and so therefore they're right. And they win. Hooray. And it continues to go. Even in light of this op-ed, right? I mean, all of us basically told everybody who would listen exactly the same things about Donald Trump. And we had Trump derangement syndrome, et cetera, or else, both sides for quite a while too. Well, both sides really. Well, actually, nothing at all even remotely like that. The last president who was even arguably as incompetent was also a Republican. But, both sides. The point is we have 7 Republicans here this Sunday with us to discuss why Democrats are at fault in all of this. And you know how that story goes. That's not news. I don't need to tell you that. But I do need to vent about that. Plenty to catch up on today. It is Friday, and so we sometimes do this without anyone at all having any input whatsoever in the show. However, I don't think I have enough material on Saudi Arabia to fill 2. Well, I probably do, but no serious desire to do that. Kavanaugh hearings ongoing. Don't know whether Armando is watching again and available. Certainly, if you are watching at home and you have something to add about that, point me in the direction of whatever it is you might want to add, and we can attempt to add it to our lineup. Plenty that happened yesterday to recap. We can comb through the pages put away in Pocket and take a look at some of those things. There's another angle on the Trump insanity making headlines this morning, this time at the LA Times. And I love to be able to sample from out of the LA Times. They wake up so late over there. It's just nice to see them each day. The Trump organization's finances are coming under the microscope by federal prosecutors, and that's a good sign too. They have been mostly under the microscope of state prosecutors lately, but it's good to see that attention is the scrutiny is widening. Chris Megerian and David Willman wrote this piece, and they wrote it way back in end of August, way back, in ancient days, August 23rd. Did I not see this at the time? I just saw it come by on Twitter, and I didn't note for the record why that was happening or who was sending it around. I wonder if I could scroll back and see. I don't know. It happened a couple minutes ago, and you know how Twitter is. That thing's gone forever. Anyway, I sometimes wonder about, makes me wonder who's bringing things up. If they're very old, and then yes, just a little old. All right, well, let's see what's going on here. Even as Donald Trump rose from New York real estate mogul to U.S. president, and that's just an allegation at this point, the innermost workings of his namesake real estate and branding company stayed shielded behind the black-tinted windows of his eponymous Fifth Avenue skyscraper. Do I have that right? Eponymous? Anyway, I was just reminded as I was reading that branding company. I mean, that's definitely an accurate description of of their latter day activities, mostly about branding deals. But lots of reporting last night from Trump's his latest unhinged, insane, mushed-mouthed rally speech, blathering, whatever. And Daniel Dale, the intrepid Daniel Dale, sat through the whole thing and reported what was going on, and it was particularly egregious in many ways. But one of the comments I noted from his coverage was that he was, and you can never tell whether he meant this word or it's just his mushed-mouthed, half-assed attempt at speaking extemporaneously, like me, that causes him to do it. But let's see if I can find that. I should just bring up Daniel Dale's feed, really. But he was saying that he was talking about the renegotiation of NAFTA, which he's very curious in his record about this and the way he discusses it. Sometimes he says he's renegotiating NAFTA. Sometimes he says he's not renegotiating NAFTA. And he seems intent on getting away from the name NAFTA. Basically, it sounds like what might really come out of this, if anything. I mean, no party to the talks, with the exception of Trump himself, who's not really a party to the talks. He's just asked somebody else to handle the talks for him. We'll discuss this in terms of a real trade agreement. Everybody else just says, I don't know, that we were invited to a thing and we showed up, including our own trade negotiator. But it's not clear what he wants to do, except perhaps change the name of NAFTA so he can say, I got rid of NAFTA and I put in its place a beautiful, beautiful agreement. And I don't know if he can figure out a way to put Trump and the Trump name in the agreement or not. I don't know if he's going to be able to get that by the people who will steal that paperwork off his desk before he can sign it. But he said this. Trump's language, Daniel Dale writes, Trump's language last night on NAFTA was interesting. He said he is replacing NAFTA not with a better trade agreement, but with a beautiful new brand. And I'm not certain whether he meant brand or his mind just slipped to brand, because that's what he's usually talking about when he is talking about business or trade or anything. I guess the quote is, we're replacing NAFTA with a beautiful new brand. It will be called the U.S.-Mexico trade deal. Hopefully, Canada will come into that deal. And if they don't, that'll be fine. And if they do, that'll be fine. I think they will. As usual, speaking off the cuff, no idea what he's talking about. Who gives a crap about anything? LOL, YOLO, nothing matters. Just spew. And so the question here is, before I return to the article, did he mean that? Replacing NAFTA with a new brand, like a new brand of, using it with, like, I would say, literary license. If he had half a brain, I would say that might be what he's doing, to say it's a new brand of trade agreement, a new concept of trade agreement. One, there's no way he has a new concept of any trade agreements. And two, that's too florid in the language department for him. A new brand, it would be misuse, but it would be licensed misused, right? Yeah, but you understand what I'm saying. Or is it that he really means it in terms of brand, like, I'm not really changing anything, I'm just rebranding NAFTA? I mean, you're never going to get any details out of him about what he thinks ought to be in such an agreement, except, no, I don't even accept it. It's not an exception. It's another offering of something other than detail, because he has no clear idea what he wants to do, never mind whether he has any idea what's getting negotiated. So he'll say something like, well, I'm going to get rid of NAFTA, and I'm going to do a trade deal that's so beautiful your head will spin. And it's going to be, I'll tell you this, it's going to be great for the United States. Maybe not so good for Mexico. I think they'll join it anyway because it's better than what they have now, which is to say an actual free trade agreement. But what I mean by when I say what they have now is nothing, because I've canceled NAFTA. It's over. So you don't even have NAFTA anymore. So it's better than nothing. So they'll take it. It might be good for them. If we can make it good for them too, so it's also, so long as it's good for us, then fine. If it's good for them, they take it, that's fine. If it's bad for them, they take it, that's fine too. We'll see what happens. That's how he approaches trade. He's got no idea. So all he may really be doing is rebranding it. We're going to replace NAFTA, which remember is the North American Free Trade Agreement. It's North American because we're in it. Mexico's in it. The other guys here in North America, Canada, they're in it too. I've never really been sure whether Central America counts as South America or North America. And that's a weird thing all by itself. I suppose if I had taken a geography course, I would have had a definitive answer. But it feels like, as I think about it, it feels more and more like our anti-immigration sentiment has, it may be the case that geographically looking at it, it looks like I would draw the line like at the top of, what's up there, Venezuela? And say Central America, that's an extension of Mexico. Mexico is North America. They're North America too. I don't know whether that's how cartographers delineate things, but that's the way I would. And I'm curious about whether we've been like, no, they're Spanish, so there's South America. Well, Mexicans speak Spanish too. They're North America. Yeah, but we don't want them to be. The Rio Grande, Texas is the end of North America. Then there's Mex-America, down to like whatever is in there. Where is Peru? I don't remember. I know about Argentina has a lot of like white looking guys. That's where we start. And everybody else in the middle is just gobbledygook. Well, okay, Mr. President, you're kind of racist. I don't think who knows? He may actually believe that. I'm playing a part here. But I'm curious whether, current anti-immigration sentiment in America is making us try to like write off Central America as somehow not part of North America, or whether it really isn't. I'll have to, those of you who are cartographers, please use the KITM hashtag to let me know. Seriously, somebody please look that up. I don't have a producer. I'm begging you. Somebody tell me. I'm curious. Anyway, I am curious about whether he thinks changing the name from NAFTA is enough to convince, well, it's probably enough to convince his supporters that something new has happened. It has to be something new. It has a different name. You don't just rebrand things. Yes, you do. And I think that's what he might have in mind. But he's going to change the name from NAFTA to the great name, the U.S.-Mexico Trade Deal. Deal. Because everyone, you want to be able to point to it in court and say the deal. The U.S.-Mexico Trade Deal. All right, that is a brilliant brand. You are a brilliant branding manager. Fantastic, good idea. Maybe Canada will come into it too, and if they do, we'll call it the U.S.-Mexico-Canada Trade Deal, or USMCTA. He might just do that. And there was a time when I thought he would say it's going to be a beautiful brand. It's going to be called the Trump is Amazing Deal, or possibly the I Love Huge Boobs Deal is a possible name for it. Don't write that off. It depends what time they ask him. But I clearly think that, well, it's obvious that he has nothing new to offer in the way of trade. But I just thought that was interesting. A beautiful new brand. Now, how do you like that for a distraction and diversion from the Los Angeles Times story? Just to remind you where we are, this is a story about Alice, The Trump organization's finances are coming under the microscope by federal prosecutors. Well, blah, blah, blah. real estate branding company. And guess what? Everyone wants to know what's going on in there. So why don't we get back to that? Always, they say here, run more like a family business than a blue chip corporate empire. Yes, because that's what it was. It's nowhere near the size, value, or any other metric you care to name when you compare the Trump organization to a blue chip corporate empire. And that's the big part of the big charade here is that I'm a successful businessman, I'm a billionaire, yada yada, big company. It's not a big company, it's a tiny company. If he's as rich as he says he is, which he is not, that would put him on a par, more or less, probably with a lot of people who are CEOs of big-time blue-chip companies and have made billions of dollars in stock and stock options and pay packages, etc. But they don't keep like all the corporate profits of the company they run. If they did that, they'd be trillionaires. But whatever. But that's part of the charade for him. Business, therefore it's all the same, yada yada. I'm quote unquote successful, so I run a huge business. You know, I've noticed he's dropped the huge and everything. You don't hear him say that a lot. The private Trump organization, the sentence continues. I can't even get through a sentence. Has operated free from the oversight of independent board members or pesky shareholders, but now that secrecy has cracked. And in fact, it cracked as early as August 23rd, 2018, when this article was written. The plea agreement in federal court this week, remember this one, by Michael Cohen. Remember that? That was like 10 years ago. And apt to say it was 10 years ago because he spent 10 years as executive vice president and special counsel at the Trump organization and later served as Trump's personal attorney, which is also a weird jumping off point for him to be claiming too. I mean, he was working as possibly in the capacity as an attorney for the Trump organization. And then when Trump needed another personal attorney, he just pretended he was the one and had been for a long time. Didn't work out very well. Anyway, the plea agreement with Michael Cohen showed that federal prosecutors had excavated invoices, receipts, tax records, emails, and other internal documents from Trump's businesses. And that is the, so far, mostly unmentioned fallout of the wild week in court that was just a few weeks ago. It's now, of course, all been overshadowed by people saying, help, the president is crazy and I'm being held captive in the White House doing his, or running interference for the rest of you and aren't I a hero? Federal prosecutors also made clear their willingness to squeeze friends of the president. They reportedly got David Pecker, a longtime Trump ally who heads the company that publishes the National Enquirer, to provide evidence in the Cohen case in exchange for immunity from criminal charges. So far, not anything has come of that yet, but I assume that the interviews have been very, very interesting. Now, the question is how much further they will dig into the murky business dealings and personal scandals at a carefully guarded company that remains key to Trump's narrative of personal success despite years of bankruptcies, lawsuits, and other controversies. The more you peel back, the more you're likely to see irregularities that are worthy of investigation, said Juan Zarate, a former Justice Department prosecutor who also helped pioneer tactics for tracking illicit cross-border financial transactions during the George W. Bush administration. 2 federal investigations pose the greatest threat so far. The U.S. Attorney's Office in Manhattan is prosecuting the case against Cohen. Special counsel Robert Mueller is looking into whether anyone from Trump's campaign, which was based at Trump Tower, which was a bad, bad idea, conspired with Russians to interfere in the 2016 election. By the way, just co-locating the campaign inside Trump Tower, well, one, it already started to pose an emoluments problem even before he quote-unquote won the election. But in addition, it was just a huge invitation to confusion, both on behalf of, on the parts of people who would be observing from the outside, whether or not the transactions that took place inside were personal in nature or campaign-like in nature, or the fact that he also located the transition there where they're quasi-official actions all taking place in the same building, all contributing to Trump's intentional, I would argue, confusion and blurring of the lines between his personal business, his campaign business, and eventually his transition and official business. And that was already intentionally blurred in his mind. He doesn't really recognize firewalls between the roles that he plays, even in business, as between, one of his businesses and another, or in co-branding things, or in keeping the legal details of things sorted out correctly. His lawyer didn't even bother starting more than one LLC, which is insane, as we've discussed on many occasions. But, I don't believe that he believes in those lines. He thinks any money that he can exercise any influence over is his. Witness just the other day, after the announcement of McCain's death, where he entirely, in pro forma fashion, though he had to have his arm twisted to lower the flags, sent an Air Force jet, a government jet at any rate, to fly Senator McCain's casket and remains, and they go together, on this government jet to Washington, D.C. for the state funeral and burial at the Naval Academy, etc. And his supporters were using that as an excuse, not only to show, he's showing proper respect for McCain's death, even though he didn't with the flag. Besides, look how generous our benevolent dictator is. He sent, Trump sent one of his jets to go pick up the casket. And of course, it wasn't one of his jets. He does have jets. The Trump organization, I guess, owns jets. And we know that. We saw them during the campaign, and his kids still fly them around at government expense when they go traveling. But he didn't send one of those. He sent a government plane, which is A, what you're supposed to do, and B, not the same thing as Mr. Generous sending his own plane at his own cost. Anyway, I think his co-location of all of his operations is just another example of how he likes to blur those lines, and another example of how the initial view of what goes on behind those tinted glass windows is, I think, you have to begin with the assumption that funds are being commingled and lines are being blurred in there. And it's more than you could be forgiven. You'd be right to suspect that every time, and you could only have helped yourself had you at least physically separated the operations. But that would never occur to him because, of course, he was skimming the money off of that. Put the transition office in Trump Tower, he charges it rent and makes money. Put the Trump Tower or the transition office somewhere else, and there's no emoluments in it for him. He was breaking the emoluments clause before he even got into office, which I guess you can't really do, but you get the idea. Trump suggested last year, and every year of his life, that he wouldn't tolerate Mueller poking around in his business. I think that's a violation. So what? He thinks everything's a violation. Yesterday he said printing the op-ed was treason. I think that's a violation. Trump told the New York Times, the failing New York Times, in an Oval Office interview. My finances are... This is great, by the way. He's so articulate. When he speaks about business, the old Donald Trump shines through. It's amazing. There's still a glimmer of hope, right? My finances are, get this, extremely good. My company is an unbelievably successful company. Okay, I was kidding. Nothing shines through. There's not a brain cell active in that stupid candy floss wrapped head. Okay. Trump has repeatedly raised the idea of trying to shut down the Russia investigation by removing Mueller. Following through might be feasible if Trump were willing to pay the political cost. He would have less liability, however, to shut down the Cohen investigation, since it would require moving against the large and well-established U.S. Attorney's Office in Manhattan. Less ability. Oh, I thought he'd have less difficulty shutting down the Cohen investigation. Well, okay, less ability to shut that one down. I don't really know why that would be. I mean, it's happening in the U.S. Attorney's Office. I don't think he has any less ability to attempt. I mean, in neither case would it be proper for him to do this. But, okay. I guess you could make the argument that a special counsel, because it's special, would possibly be easier to get away with shutting down. Anyway, Alan Garten, whose name has not been called in the court docket yet. I've been waiting and waiting to see whether he ends up answering questions or finds himself indicted. It'd be amazing if he escapes. Alan Garten, the Trump organization's top lawyer, said in a phone interview Thursday that the company has been fully cooperative in the investigations. Whatever. Trump has refused to release his tax returns to the public. You know about that. And the company doesn't disclose its annual revenue, but the perception of Trump as a titan of industry, forged in the popular imagination with the reality show The Apprentice, and as you know, that was originally a comedy, helped propel him to the White House, starting with his original announcement in the gilded lobby of Trump Tower. "I'm really rich," he said, which really should have been basically the tip-off that he's really not fit for office. Then there's more description of his various businesses. I am not certain that the rest of the article is absolutely necessary to include, but I just want to at least throw out there as we near our first break that has been happening quietly in the background, of course, because we've been distracted by so many other outrageous and horrific developments, but that is bubbling out there, and of course, both on the state level and now, I guess, on the federal level too. I don't know whether they're going to shunt all of that off to the district attorney, the U.S. attorney rather, for the Southern District of New York, or whether, and this upcoming election may change the occupant of the Attorney General's office in New York State. We may see some action there. Just kind of wanted to remind you all that those pieces are still turning, and I think probably the people working on those cases, both in Mueller's office and other associated prosecutorial offices, or I guess maybe not associated, prosecutorial offices, are probably grateful for the distraction and enjoying it, except for the fact that one of the distractions is the possible dissolution of the independent judiciary with the confirmation of Brett Kavanaugh. That probably worries them a little bit too. All right, let's take a break, reorganize, forge a path ahead for the rest of the show. We'll be right back after this. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, interrupting this little break to say thanks so much to all of you who are contributing supporters of Kagro in the Morning. Thousands of you are downloading the show each day, but fewer than 1 in 25 regular listeners are donating to help keep us on the air. For the money you'd spend on a single 3-minute iTunes song, we bring you 2 hours of great news and entertainment every day, 5 days a week. Patreon.com, Patreon.com makes it easy. You can find us there by searching KagroX or David Waldman or Kagro in the Morning or even Daily Coast Radio in their search box, and you'll be right where you need to be to make easy, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Once again, thanks so much for your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's just take one diversion here, just because it is Friday, and sometimes you catch a piece of news that might sneak up on the rest of the world over the weekend, but not us, because we took note of it on Friday. Of course, it's also possible that it won't develop into anything at all, but Chris Geidner passes this piece of information on from Caitlin Polantz, who is a CNN reporter and is at the courthouse reporting that radio host Randy Credico, I don't know how he pronounces that, it's Credico, arrived about an hour ago to the D.C. federal courthouse for grand jury testimony in the Russia probe. Now, interestingly, it also notes that he brought service dog Bianca, a 12-year-old, what is this? What kind of dog is this? I have no idea. What? Coton de Tulea? Is that even close to the pronunciation? And is that a breed of dog? I really have no idea. I have no idea. Anyway, I imagine that's it, given the construction of the sentence. Anyway, the court gave him special permission to have Bianca with him, and that's nice. It's nice to have a service dog with you. I don't know whether that's going to keep him calm during the grand jury testimony, but also, I guess, one other question that arises is, who in the hell is Randy Credico? Or Credico? I have seriously, literally no idea. But the fact that he is being asked to testify in the Russia probe and is described in Wikipedia, I had to Wikipedia look him up, as what? A perennial political candidate, comedian, radio host, activist, and the former director of the William Moses Kunstler Fund for Racial Justice. Tells me, I don't know, tells me nothing about him, really, generally speaking, but Chris Geidner says this is going to be a DAY day. So, I don't know. We'll see whether that's of some value, but I guess if we hear some crazy stuff over the weekend about what he's doing, you'll be on alert. Let me see, what's up with this guy? Man, I don't know. I can't sort this guy out. So, but when Chris Geidner, I'll take his word for it, when he says that's going to be a scene, I guess we keep an eye on it. All right. Other things that I am more certain present real hard news and discussion opportunities include the following. We got word yesterday that that Trump and his quote-unquote legal team have decided that the absolute best way to demonstrate his rock-solid belief in his own innocence is to refuse to answer any questions whatsoever, no matter how posed, by the special counsel, Robert Mueller, and basically anybody else who ever wanted to ask him a question, including, how you doing? I'm not going to answer that. Of course, people who have followed his various unhinged comments and tweets over the years know very well that he has freely offered no end of commentary with respect to the perceived guilt in his mind of those who, for instance, take advantage of the Fifth Amendment, plead the Fifth when making court appearances, and essentially, of course, refusing to answer any questions from a prosecutor or investigator. It's a close parallel to taking the Fifth Amendment. But never mind that. I'm me and you're you, and that's the difference between us. And I hope you're not going to fight me on that. I'll let you remain anonymous, gutless, really. Everyone will have by now seen that excerpt from his Montana appearance. 2 attempts at saying the word anonymous, and, as somebody put it on Twitter last night, it's a neck-and-neck race between dentures and dementia. Can't figure out exactly which one or what combination and what percentages is driving that. But anonymous is I would have given anything for the crowd behind him to have gone doo-doo-doo-doo-doo. That would have been awesome. But they're pretty dumb back there. And I have a feeling that they may have missed out on the whole Sesame Street thing. Anyway, Trump will not answer questions about obstruction or probably anything else, even in writing. Mark Sumner summarizes things for us on the front page of Daily Kos. Took care of this one last evening. If you didn't get a chance to see it, he starts off by drawing on the Associated Press's reporting on that fact last night. They say Donald Trump will not answer any questions related to obstruction of the Russia investigation, not in person and not in writing. Remember that they toyed with possibly doing it in writing for a while. It's amazing, of course, that he thinks his lawyers think he may perjure himself in writing, which is astounding because they're going to be doing the writing. But I guess, maybe that does say that. Maybe it doesn't say that. It might just be that they say, well, let's go for broke and just say we're not going to answer any questions. If the court forces us, it's a negotiating position in his mind, I'm sure. He probably really does think this. Let's just say we're not going to answer any questions at all. Well, Mr. President, they're probably going to force us to at least answer some questions in writing. There's no excuse not to do that. I know, but let's make them say, if it comes down to it, we'll do it. I'm sure there's a way to do it without getting in trouble. But why offer it in writing? Why offer that? Why make work for yourself? If they want to force us, well, the PR value of cooperating or being seen to cooperate and not generating a new controversy surrounding the ability of the news media. They're liars. They're failing. Yeah, I know. But they're going to report that you refused. Well, that's okay. My supporters don't care. They like that I refused. They like that I'm fighting the courts. The courts are wrong on this. Everyone knows it, and it's fake news. I don't understand how those two things go together, but I guess that's what we'll do. So no questions, not in person, not in writing. Earlier this week, The Trump legal team claimed that special counsel Robert Mueller had agreed to accept some answers from Donald Trump in writing, but those questions were centered on the issue of conspiracy, a topic where evidence is likely to be based on emails, letters, dates, meetings, and actions. Obstruction is a different story. A big part of obstruction is intent. And Trump attorney, so-called Trump attorney, Rudy Giuliani has long made it clear that he did not want Trump answering questions on this topic. Now, Giuliani is stating that Trump definitely will not address this topic. However, considering that it is the topic on which a face-to-face meeting between Trump and the special counsel is most likely to have an impact, it's also the topic most likely to generate a subpoena. So, Giuliani's statement can be read as Trump will not answer federal investigators' questions in writing or in person about whether he tried to block the probe into Russian interference willingly. The firm refusal to deal with obstruction in any manner follows close on the heels of statements from Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh indicating that he would not recuse himself from questions regarding Trump and the Russia investigation, even though Kavanaugh was part of serving a subpoena to a sitting president when that president was a Democrat. He's since had a change of heart. According to the New York Times, Giuliani's statement concerning the obstruction issue is, "That's a no-go. That's not going to happen. There will be no questions at all on obstruction," that we'll agree to. Eventually there will be some questions, I think. Giuliani also, well, who knows? Maybe he'll just say impeach me. Giuliani also seems freshly sure of Trump's position on other communications with the special counsel, saying that questions would be limited to written questions on the topic of conspiracy. I guess he'll take those questions. And Mueller would have to justify any follow-ups. Giuliani has previously justified Trump's refusal to answer questions related to obstruction on the grounds that Trump has the power to fire anyone without cause, so the reason why he dismissed FBI Director James Comey or other officials doesn't matter. And Giuliani has protested that if Mueller can't prove conspiracy first, then there's no crime to obstruct. But neither one of those assertions, and that's a good pronunciation for it, absertions, we should just call them that, holds up to even the most casual inspection. But it seems clearer than ever that Trump does not intend to talk to Mueller. Everything that Giuliani and Trump's legal team have done so far has been simply been to bring them to this point, to delay any questioning until Trump is in reach of ending the investigation. Trump has made it clear that following the election, Jeff Sessions is out. A new attorney general will be able to take charge of the investigation and either restrict or simply end the special counsel's writ. Should Trump still have to face Mueller, he's counting on Kavanaugh to prevent Mueller from executing a subpoena or issuing an indictment. Giuliani has also been pressing the idea of a window in any prosecution surrounding the election, ensuring that Trump makes it to his new AG and new justice with no speed bumps. In any case, if Robert Mueller wants to talk to Trump, there's just one way that's going to happen: a subpoena. Doing it now. Well, we'll see whether Mueller agrees or whether he even thinks it's necessary or whether that moves the needle at all. But, the sooner the better, of course. That seems fairly obvious, too. Let's see. Speaking of Kavanaugh, one issue that has not yet come up in the questioning, but has come up in the press investigation into his background, but which we have not yet mentioned, is written up by the personality, the Twitter personality we know as NYC Southpaw, and the rest of the world knows by his actual name. Do they not list it anymore? Yes, they do. Okay, Yahoo didn't adopt was it the New York Times that was going to adopt the standard of not putting the author? Lupe Lupin. I got no idea whether we're pronouncing that one correctly, and I could ask directly, but I prefer to screw things up and then plead ignorance. Democrats, he writes, may question Kavanaugh's personal finances. As Brett Kavanaugh enters his second day of contentious confirmation hearings for his nomination to the Supreme Court, he could face questions about his finances on subjects ranging from baseball tickets to the down payment for his home. We haven't discussed this very much, but yeah, he's got a very weird excuse for the questions that arose. Taking just the briefest look at his financial disclosure forms, I think, basically reveals that he had a relatively large, for a normal person, amount of debt that sort of suddenly got paid off out of nowhere and with no explanation on the disclosure forms anyway about where the money came from, just as his nomination came through, as if political handlers thought it would be best if he came before the committee debt-free, and so therefore the debt was consciously erased by political operatives, not just simply erased. Although that would have been a better trick. They might as well just have said, just put zero and we'll lean on any banks that think you owe them money and maybe have them thrown out of a helicopter. That would be another way of handling it. But so far it's suspected that it's just, well, I'll pay off your debt and make sure that you know, if you're asked questions, how that would disguise previous debt, I have no idea. But I guess that they were going to come up with some kind of cockamamie story about how he paid off the debt and figure that that would work with the deplorables, and anybody who just didn't believe it was into fake news, and they would just handle things that way. In a little noticed letter dated August 30th, Senator Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut, who is also a little noticed senator, unfortunately, but that's kind of the way it goes. Greg knows him, though. Anyway, he raised a series of questions about Kavanaugh's financial disclosure, including several years of large credit card balances maintained during his time as a judge on the D.C. Circuit. And, you know, normal people will sometimes have large credit card debt balances. That, you know, these days actually is like, well, that might be an actual normal person being put into a position of power. That by itself is certainly not an awful thing, right? They understand the burdens of debt that normal people face, and they might be sympathetic to it. That's a good thing. In July, the White House told the Washington Post that these balances were a consequence of Kavanaugh incurring large debts. Tens of thousands of dollars. Okay, that's the number that's on the paper. I know that the numbers are a consequence of large debts, but here's the dumb reason why the White House says Kavanaugh had such a high amount of debt. He purchased Washington Nationals season tickets for a group of friends who later paid him back, as well as home improvements. Now, I can believe home improvements. I can believe that you purchased season tickets for some friends. What I can't believe is that you arranged with friends like, okay, let's all buy season tickets together. Okay, great. You know, you can all afford that, right? Yes, sure, let's do it. But I'll tell you what, I'll be the one that goes to the office because I'm hardly working. I am just a judge on the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. I got plenty of time. I'll go to the box office and I'll buy the season tickets for all of us, and then you all pay me back. I'll put it on my credit card. And apparently years go by, and he's not at any point like, guys, this is getting crazy. I have tens of thousands of dollars worth of debt for your baseball tickets. When are you going to pay me? You said you could afford these things. It's just not a plausible story. Anyway, Blumenthal's letter asks Kavanaugh for details about both types of expenditures, including identifying the group of friends he bought the tickets for. What a great bunch of friends. Do they attend the games? I mean, at any point, is Kavanaugh seething all game long? Like, these MFers, I bought these are my seats. These guys haven't paid me back. You should not be here. No, he's loving it. In his recent financial disclosure reports, Kavanaugh reported that the credit card debt and a separate loan against his retirement account, known as a thrift savings program, because he's a government employee. Remember, he's the government employee that hates the government, like all of them. All right, well, at any rate, now that's all reported to have been paid in full. However, the source of the funds used to repay those debts is unknown because he is a federal employee. We know how much money he makes. He can't do it without outside help. Kavanaugh says via the White House he finally received reimbursement for the season tickets from his friends, but it's unclear how he managed to pay back the loan and the debt arising from home improvements. Though, presumably, you paid back that debt by paying back your debt. You do it slowly, ordinarily, but okay, fine. He did a lump sum thing, but no, not likely on his salary. But yeah, personally, I would just say that the season ticket thing is just like the dumbest sounding explanation ever, but it's the only thing that he could think of on short notice that wasn't just, that was better than admitting the truth, which is probably that, like, I don't know, the Koch brothers or Richard Viguerie or, not Donald Trump. He wasn't going to do it. Maybe the Trump Foundation paid off his debt. Joey No Socks paid off his debt, something like that, just to get rid of it. And he didn't want to admit that. Not a good thing. Oh, I'm a judge. I took a payoff from a mob figure. But what's the big deal? The president's a mob figure. Mob figures are in these days. Everybody loves The Sopranos. He could have tried that. The inquiries into Kavanaugh's personal finances, however, extend well beyond those previously reported issues. Blumenthal also asks, how did Kavanaugh manage to come up with the down payment on his $1.2 million home in Chevy Chase, Maryland in 2006 without apparently drawing any significant amount of money from his reported bank accounts between 2005 and 2007? A down payment on the home in the range of 10 to 20% would, of course, have required Kavanaugh to put down between $120,000 and $240,000 in cash. Okay. And again, he's a federal employee at this point. Through 2005, 2006, and 2007, however, Kavanaugh reports a range of $10,000 to $50,000 in his bank accounts. Why did Kavanaugh's bank account balances at least double between 2008 and 2009, rising from a disclosed range of $15,000 to $50,000 in 2008 to a range of $100,000 to $250,000 in 2009? Non-investment income included in the disclosure reports only list an honorarium from Harvard in the amount insufficient to explain the change. Other questions. How does Kavanaugh pay his initiation and membership fees to his country club? That club, the Chevy Chase Club, describes itself as a distinctive social institution that since 1892 has provided members, their families, and guests with recreation and refuge from the stresses of daily life in the environs of our nation's capital. It's a nice description. I don't know if it necessarily belonged in the piece, but I guess that's their way of saying it's a pretty pricey place to belong, and it's unclear how he would be able to afford that, not take a dent in his bank account, given that we know what his salary was because he was a federal employee. Why doesn't Kavanaugh list a 2014 delayed cost of living adjustment given to all federal judges in an approximately $150,000 lump sum in Kavanaugh's case? Why didn't he declare that as income? That's a problem. Again, you're a federal employee. The federal government paid you. There is a record. Your record doesn't match our records. You're not telling the truth here. No, fake news. The government faked up the payment to him. It's all baloney. Why did Kavanaugh claim an exemption and refuse to list gifts and reimbursements on his 2018 report for this Supreme Court nomination? It's unclear what the basis of the exemption was, and Blumenthal asks him to itemize gifts notwithstanding the claimed exemption. Not forthcoming so far. Is it accurate, his letter further asks, that neither Kavanaugh nor his wife own any investment securities outside of their retirement accounts? The White House sent a brief response on Sunday that did not respond to the substance of any of these questions, and therefore it's not a response, but I guess we're lost for a lack of terminology. The White House sent a written statement on Sunday that didn't respond to the substance of any of these questions. But yeah, that last, by the way, that last question from Blumenthal, I mean, that's why he had to come up with the stupid baseball ticket thing. I didn't say I own any investments, so I can't say I took the money out of that. I didn't inherit anything. I haven't declared any lump sum payments. I didn't even declare the one that the federal government knows they gave me. It's pretty sloppy, but he learned from Jared Kushner. So what? So I lied, or so I screwed it up, or I intentionally left things out. I'll revise it later. What's the big deal? There were no consequences for him. Well, you're not the president's son-in-law. He might not care that much about you. All right, so what was this brief response, I guess? Well, on September 4th, 2018, Judge Kavanaugh will appear before the Committee on the Judiciary, wrote Shahira Knight, a legislative affairs aide to President Trump, which is weird because Judge Kavanaugh's nomination is not a legislative affair at all. It's it's a piece of executive business, but okay, they just don't have, it wouldn't make any sense necessarily to name the position that Shahira Knight occupies, legislative executive affairs aide. You know what I mean? But okay, it's executive business, but it's happening in the legislature. But you understand. Maybe you don't. It doesn't matter. This hearing will provide you, though, the statement says, and other members of the committee an opportunity to ask questions, including the questions you detailed in your letter. How do you like that response, by the non-response? Dear White House, I don't know to whom the letter was addressed. How did Kavanaugh come up with the down payment on his house? How come his bank accounts actually increase during the period when he should have been making this payment on the house? Does he own any investments? He says he doesn't, so that can't be it. So where's the money coming from? And did he receive any gifts or honoraria? He only lists one. That wouldn't have been enough to do it, so that's not it. He's also paying for membership in an expensive country club, and that doesn't seem to be getting in the way of anything. And also, we paid him a delayed cost of living adjustment in 2014, about $150,000. And we know this because the government paid him, and he doesn't list that. There's a million things wrong with this disclosure form. What are the answers to these questions? And their response is, you have asked several questions. The nominee will answer those questions on September 4th, 2018, which they put out all explicitly out there. I guess they needed things to fill the paper with, so it looked like they were giving a full response. How amazing is that? I know I asked questions. I asked them. You're acknowledging that I asked them and telling me that there are answers. And someone will provide them to me at some point. Thank you. That's really kind of amazing. All right. Well, notwithstanding the White House's non-response, Maria McElwain? How does that get pronounced? She's Blumenthal's spokeswoman, so you can ask her. Declined to confirm that he would raise financial issues while questioning Kavanaugh at the hearing. Why not? I guess you don't want to tip off what they're going to do, but I think the letter was probably a pretty good tip. Senator Blumenthal has said that he's not going to discuss what specific topics he plans to raise during the Q&A ahead of time, but the issues he raised in his letter certainly are among those he's interested in following up on. That's just, we might as well point that out. What a dumb part of the Washington game this whole thing is, right? You write a letter asking these questions. If it's not dumb enough that the White House says, hi, I see you've asked some questions here. That's nice. I think you might get some answers. And those answers might come on September 4th, 2018, when the nominee appears before you. In other words, ask him, not us. But this is a very formal way of saying, I don't know, and we're not even going to try to answer. Well, you would say, okay, well, this is going to be a lopsided fight. One side is populated by idiots, and the other one is this sharp guy who noticed all these discrepancies on the financial disclosure form. So surely, okay, they say you're going to ask him about that, or you can ask him about that at his hearing. Are you gonna? We will neither confirm nor deny, but surely those issues are among those I might raise later on. In other words, I don't know whether it's an active attempt to say, well, look, I'm not going to just tell him what my questions are going to be, which would make sense, or she doesn't know. She didn't ask him, but this is a written statement, so I'm sure they had some discussion about it. The press wants to know if you're going to ask him about his personal finances. Well, I'm not going to disclose what I'm going to ask him about. I might. It's possible, and I probably will, but I'm not going to, commit to it. What if I don't do it? Then what am I, a liar at that point? Just tell him I might bring it up. Well, that's the Washington game. And I guess, again, here, even NYC Southpaw. Look, I got to fill the page. They want this many words about this topic. So I'm going to report that Blumenthal asked questions. That's important. I'm going to report that the White House did not answer those questions. And I'm going to report that Blumenthal did not say that he was going to re-ask those questions, but he might. And he's here we're talking about a good reporter. And you know what? I don't even know whether NYC Southpaw is male or female. I have no idea how NYC Southpaw identifies. I've never asked that. that dog that is used in the Avatar doesn't give anything away either. I don't know. Somehow I came away with the impression that he was speaking somehow in a stereotypically male voice, but he or she would probably object to that too. Anyway, just an interesting line of questioning. Maybe that will be on the table today. Maybe there'll be some questions about that. He should, you would think, be prepared to answer those questions. I think they would be pretty obvious. All right. Let's see. Where are we in our catching up on comments? Oh, okay. Well, let's see. So far, BJ Hutch, our Montreal girl, says she's thinking that Trump's slurred speech and sniffing is due to prescription medications likely taken for anxiety. Just a hunch. That could be. The sniffs are back. That's what I wanted to make that point. We've seen them from time to time, but it used to be we see them in the debates where he would give that in between. And, yeah, I mean, it may just be, honestly, could be just swollen nasal passages. And he's speaking at such a rapid clip that he's lacking for oxygen, and that's what comes out. And Jingy has appreciated the anomina. Do we have that video? Can I play that? Will that come through if I do that? Everyone knows what I'm talking about, right? So, yeah, I'm glad everyone knows what I'm talking about, right? I'm glad you're listening to this radio show. All right. Let's see. Other incidents popping up on the radar. Oh, well, for one thing, our top of the hour break coming up. Lots to catch up on, both from things that the so-called president said in his speeches and various comments over the last couple of days, plus yet more that's going to surface in the Kavanaugh hearings, and things have already surfaced. We're well past the threshold for being able to at least level the charge that Judge Kavanaugh perjured himself both in these hearings and in his own 2006 confirmation hearings to the D.C. Circuit Court. But like we always say, LOL, YOLO, nothing matters. It won't, nothing that would garner 67 votes to impeach him from his present position or his position on the Supreme Court visible on the horizon. So it looks like he's going to get away with it. How exciting is that? All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show. Just as our music ends, let's see, I'm searching here for a piece that I was fairly certain that Joan had put out, just in terms of letting us know where we stand on the perjury issue. And I thought that I had seen that she put a diary together the other day, or yesterday, I think it was, that was basically, hey, you want Kavanaugh for perjury? Here you go. Let me see if I can find it. There it is. You want Kavanaugh perjury? Here you go. I remember that quite accurately. Let's see. This one came up yesterday, just in the noon hour, Eastern time. Anyway, Senator Patrick Leahy of Vermont has had a hair on fire several days. That's some phrase. Now, if you ever write an anonymous op-ed that says that, I'll catch you, Joan. With the Supreme Court nomination hearing of Brett Kavanaugh, in which he has repeatedly referenced the fact that Kavanaugh committed perjury before the Senate Judiciary Committee years ago when he was being vetted for his current seat on the D.C. Circuit. And here it is. And it doesn't even have anything to do with the fact that he's also got him dead to rights on stealing emails, which, as everybody knows, was actually kind of a big deal recently. This has to do with some other activity. Brett Kavanaugh, it should be noted, is basically like almost a Forrest Gump character who shows up at the inflection points of all of the worst official Republican behavior of the last 2 decades, I would say. And by the way, most of his correspondence in the emails now being revealed, both by Cory Booker and I guess by others now. And we were on that fact live yesterday. And by the way, seems like everybody forgot that you needed 2/3 of the Senate to expel a senator, at least for a good portion of the morning. And we were able to remind everybody of that. And so I think that calmed a lot of nerves. And they even changed the story later on about whether or not they were going to try to expel him in the first place, if you noticed that one. Anyway, as it turns out, his correspondent, or several correspondents in all of these episodes, one was mentioned yesterday, was Manuel Miranda. Manny Miranda was the one who was thieving all of these emails, or arranging for the thieving of all these emails and documents and sharing them with Kavanaugh. And that too relates to a perjury charge, potentially, in that he was asked basically whether he had ever, he wasn't asked until this year whether he had ever received any purloined documents, and he says, "Oh no, at least none I know of." And he was basically trapped in that by Leahy, who says, "Well, here's the things you got, and they're marked pretty clearly as highly confidential. Why did you have them?" But there's stronger cases for perjury out there that relate to other conversations that he had with other players in the George W. Bush White House and in the Republican ranks, including, we'll get to this one perhaps later on, Barbara Ladine, who is like the female Forrest Gump and all that. She's really been at the center of some serious Republican just dumpster fire crap over the past 3 decades, I would say. She's had an even longer career, garbage dumpster diving for the Republicans. Anyway, let's carry on with Jones' summation here of at least the first rock-solid perjury case, which won't be prosecuted against Kavanaugh. The deal is on this. The two, NYC Southpaw makes an appearance once again, tweeting out 2 documents side by side, which make the case. On the left, we are told, sworn testimony in which Brett Kavanaugh tells Ted Kennedy, that's how long ago this was, that he was, quote, not involved in handling, unquote, Bill Pryor's nomination. Bill Pryor, again, just for background, one of the judges over whose nomination there was a pitched battle that led to the nuclear option confrontation in 2004 and 2005. So on the left, transcript of Kavanaugh's testimony in his own nomination to the circuit court, in which they asked, look, were you involved in handling Bill Pryor's nomination? Because that was very poorly handled and caused an awful lot of controversy and trouble and led to a big nuclear option fight, et cetera, et cetera. Did you have a hand in that? No, I didn't. Whereas on the right, Southpaw gives us Kavanaugh, an email, I guess, noting that Kavanaugh is invited to attend an, quote, emergency umbrella meeting at a private law firm, by the way, to discuss nominee Bill Pryor's hearing. Were you involved in Bill Pryor's nomination? No. Well, here's an email that says you were being invited to a meeting to discuss Bill Pryor's nomination, an emergency meeting at a private law firm, no less. And I guess maybe he thought, oh, no, well, I wasn't involved in an official capacity. I went to a private law firm to do it. I don't think he's even bothered to offer that excuse. The quote, though, from the testimony, I guess Kennedy asks him, what? I know you are talking here about the background discussions, but once you have the nominee and you are involved in the process where he calls a case the worst abomination of constitutional law in our history, criticizes the Miranda case, not Manny Miranda's case, but the actual Miranda rights case, and refers to the Supreme Court as 9 octogenarian lawyers. You are involved in the vetting process. Whether you did anything at all about it, I gather you say that you did not. Kavanaugh, no, I was not involved in handling his nomination. I do know he explained that in his hearing, and I will leave it at that. So essentially they had Bill Pryor before them, and on the record, Pryor had at some point, or at least had been reported as saying, oh, the Miranda case was terrible, and the Supreme Court is a bunch of old farts, essentially. 9 octogenarian lawyers. And so somehow that's a bad thing, and therefore whatever. Whoever his audience was at the time was supposed to appreciate that, and then it was supposed to come back to haunt him later on once he was being nominated to the Supreme Court. Are you going to honor their precedent handed down from the Supreme Court, as you would be obligated to do in any normally functioning circuit court. And they were trying to get him to say, yeah, I will, even though why, I have no idea, because it would be a lie. But formally, they needed him to say, oh, I'll respect precedent. I mean, it would be better if he admitted, no, I hate those people. They're idiots, and I'll overturn whatever they offer me as quickly as possible. Then they would say, well, you don't have judicial temperament, and then they would vote, and Republicans would say yes, and Democrats would say no, and they might have to use the nuclear option in order to get to that point, and he would be a judge, and la-da-da-da-da-da. There you have it. That's the end of the process. It's all a charade. I understand this. You understand this. But I don't know. Somehow we'll fill time talking about how this stuff plays out. It's shocking how much of these hearings really are just play acting and kabuki theater, as people say. But there you have it. I guess you might as well know that that's the case, and we should acknowledge it. In case you were wondering about the outcome, Pryor is on the circuit, the 11th Circuit Court. So, I mean, there's no avoiding it. So, la-di-da. There you have it. And controversial or not, comments about hating the 9 octogenarian lawyers and the Miranda rights case notwithstanding, the Republicans got their vote, and that's that. How did the vote go, by the way? Just sort of out of curiosity. Do they have anything in Wikipedia about it? I guess not. Let's see. It just says sort of that he is on the court, and it doesn't say anything about the process. Oh, there we go. Let's see. 11th Circuit nomination and confirmation. It was in April 2003. He was held up in the battle over, in the filibuster of several of the George W. Bush judges. Due to a filibuster on his nomination, Bush installed Pryor as a circuit court judge on February 20th, 2004, using a recess appointment, which just happened just a couple years before the Supreme Court ended up killing off the use of recess appointments. Just use a few more there, Mr. President, and then we'll cut it off because eventually a Democrat will try to use these things. In fact, why don't we wait for a Democrat to assume office in order to enunciate that standard? And that's exactly what they did. Let's see. And so there was a recess appointment, and then in May of 2005, the Gang of 14 announcement, the Gang of 14 agreement was announced, ensuring an up or down vote on Pryor and 2 other stalled Bush nominees. Priscilla Owen, who was mentioned yesterday, as another one of the flashpoints about which Kavanaugh may have 1, been plotting, and 2, committed perjury. And then the third, Janice Rogers Brown, who we didn't mention yesterday but has been called on the show before. In June of 2005, Pryor was confirmed by a vote of 53 to 45, which of course was only possible because they agreed not to filibuster his nomination in order to avoid the invocation of the nuclear option, and all of history would have been changed. Probably would have been, actually, had they done that. And of course, Merrick Garland would probably be on the Supreme Court too, had they done that. Well, actually, I should take that back, because Republicans would have invoked the nuclear option and Democrats would have said this is horrific, which they did say. And then instead of saying, no, actually, it's kind of good, and doing it in 2013, they would have resumed as the majority in the mid-2000s, and in all likelihood at the urging of Pat Leahy, they would have reinstated the filibuster with respect to, well, everything, judicial nominations and all, because we want to restore norms. And then Merrick Garland wouldn't have made it onto the Supreme Court, and several other judges also likely would not have, unless they could have convinced Pat Leahy to change his mind sometime between 2007 and 2013. Actually, I guess they would have had to wait with the for a majority in the Senate until later, right? They didn't take back the majority right away there. And It's possible that he would have changed his mind, but the situation in the courts might be perhaps even more egregious had they stuck to their original position and reinstated the filibuster, and then only to see it erased in 2017 after a year-long filibuster of the Garland nomination. So there you have it. Just wanted to give you that background and who is Bill Pryor and how does he enter into all of this. So anyway, on the one hand, there was the testimony from Kavanaugh that I didn't have anything to do with the Pryor nomination. I didn't deal with it at all. And in contravention to that fact, a email, let's see, the sender is, does it say? Creator Joel Pardue, to the recipient. At least one of them is redacted. Then blind copy, interestingly, to Kavanaugh. There will be an emergency umbrella meeting tomorrow, 2:30 p.m., right after the 1:30 call at the law firm of Baker and Hostetler. Big name in D.C. And we need to discuss nominee Bill Pryor's hearing next Wednesday. And there are important confirmation process issues with Judge Kuhl that need to be addressed. And for some reason, somebody thought it would be a wise idea to BCC Kavanaugh on that, even though he totally wasn't involved. How interesting is that? Joan continues, there is, of course, much more. There are at least 3 more emails in which Kavanaugh is discussing the Pryor nomination, including one in which he's invited to a conference call to discuss Pryor and coordinate plans and efforts. No, I was not involved in handling his nomination, Kavanaugh told Senator Kennedy, an out-and-out lie that cannot possibly be attributed to a memory lapse. We're seeing that thanks to Democrats' refusal to go along with Chairman Chuck Grassley's unilateral and arbitrary decision to withhold reams of critical information from the public eye. Keep it up, Democrats, she writes. Keep fighting to get Kavanaugh's entire paper trail released. Certainly what they ought to be doing. But, LOL, YOLO, nothing matters. I mean, what can I tell you? They fight to block the release of the papers. The papers may or may not finally be released. It will become obvious to anyone who looks that he committed perjury. And then they will say, okay, well, we don't think he did, but okay. Anyway, it's time to vote. Republicans will vote. They'll have 51, perhaps, and that'll be that. End of the story for Kavanaugh. Supreme Court? Yeah, you bet. Let's see. Joan also picked up the topic of the very weird email that made its way to Kavanaugh from Barbara Ladine. She doesn't mention that Barbara Ladine is involved here, but let's use this as the jumping off point. Newly released Kavanaugh emails from Bush administration shed new light on his previous perjury. This one just before she published the last one, just like 15 minutes earlier. Pat Leahy remains incredulous at the fact that Kavanaugh claims ignorance and innocence at being the recipient of stolen emails while he was in the George W. Bush White House. Those emails, stolen from Leahy and other Judiciary Democrats, included information and strategies that they were using to combat some of Bush's most extreme far-right judicial nominees. Kavanaugh spent a lot of time playing dumb, eventually insisting that he didn't know the information he was getting was stolen. Now, some of the emails from that time have finally been released, including one from a Senate Republican staffer, that's Ladine, to Kavanaugh, with the subject line, spying. Subtle, eh? The email begins, I have a friend who is a mole for us on the left. It, so that she doesn't reveal whether or not the mole is male or female, it just called me to tell me the following news. No, that's not a clue at all that this is stolen, pilfered, larcenous information. Not at all. This is where Kavanaugh's previous potential perjury and his confirmation hearing to his current seat on the D.C. Circuit meets his right now perjury. There was, of course, in the day before's hearing, Leahy said, I'm concerned because there's evidence that Mr. Miranda provided you with materials that were stolen from me and that would contradict your prior testimony. That would be his current lying about having received those materials. So he lied in every hearing he's ever appeared in, I guess, before the Senate Judiciary Committee. And that's supposed to hurt. But when it's just going to be a party line vote, I guess there's not much that makes any difference to these folks, and they're just going to vote to confirm him anyway. And, I mean, if that hasn't been obvious for a long time, I don't know where you've been. All right, let me take a look back in my own Twitter feed. I put together a few snapshots of the Ledeen situation, taken from reporting on who she is and what her background has been. I said that she's sort of a Forrest Gump figure like Kavanaugh is. And I picked up on that very same email when it was being shared around because of that strange subject line, spying. And again, it's from Barbara Ledeen, whose email address at the time, Barbara_Ledeen at src.senate.gov. Senate Republican Conference.senate.gov is basically what that means. It's going to, and here it's not blind copy, the recipient is Brett Kavanaugh, again, WHOEOP, White House Office, Executive Office of the President. Also, by the way, a named recipient of the email here, Matt Schlapp, who's been in the news a little bit lately. He, of course, receiving it on his email address, mschlapp at georgewbush.com. So that's interesting. And one more Senate Republican staffer gets it, Mark Rogers. So there you have it. Subject, spying. I have a friend, as we read before, who is a mole for us on the left. I'd like to know who that is, by the way. It just called to tell me the following news. The Group of Nine, the so-called G9, which is composed of 9 pro-choice groups, Planned Parenthood and NARAL among them, gasp, just formed the Joint Emergency Campaign Fund, which is solely for the Supreme Court battle. They have put an initial $3 million into it, which is to be used just for media. This is separate from the $20 million just given Planned Parenthood anonymously, but it is from Warren Buffett for the multiple things. That's what it says, for the multiple things, but a big chunk of it, of which is for judges. They just had a meeting with the Dem staff of the Judiciary Committee, and my friend is reporting that neither the Democratic Judiciary staff nor the groups have done any research, dropped word here, have done any research presumably on the likely presumed nominees. Therefore, it is important to note that if we have a nominee, we need to zip that person right through the process, in all caps. We cannot beat $20 million. Well, they weren't able to zip them through the process, and they were eventually able, with the threat of the nuclear option, to beat the $20 million in most cases. But there you have the full text of the spying meeting. And so you might wonder, who is Barbara Ledeen? Why would she write such a thing? And first, I would mention to you that Poli Sci, once again, jumps on the topic and has something to say about who Ledeen is. She puts it this way. Interesting that the 2003 spying email to Kavanaugh is from Barbara Ledeen, who is now a Grassley staffer. She may even then have been a Grassley staffer. A Grassley staffer, but in the Russia probe. And the second person tied to Mike Flynn, who launched a covert Hillary Clinton email operation. The first being the now deceased Peter Smith. You remember that whole incident? The shadowy billionaire who was going to finance his own look into the Hillary Clinton emails, server, etc., and the hacking. And he sort of died in the middle of all of it. Yeah. Well, all right. So that probably raises your eyebrows. And so I thought I would take a look as well. And I recognize the Ledeen name as well. And I found an old Guardian newspaper article that I guess will fill in the blanks somewhat about Peter Smith as well, and grabbed a couple of quotes from it. And that piece is, let's see, we'll pull it up and take a look at it. Where's the Guardian puts their dates in funny places. Here we are. Oh, Friday the 13th. That would be the 13th of October, 2017. So October 2017. Ready? Flynn ally, and we're talking about the notorious spy Mike Flynn, now having pled guilty in to several of his charges. Flynn ally sought help from dark web. That has been a hot topic. From the dark web in covert Clinton email investigation. The subheader of this piece reads, Barbara Ladine, she's right there in the subheader, a staffer on the committee looking into Trump's Russia ties and a friend of Mike Flynn, tried to launch her own investigation into Clinton's emails. She was working on an official one, I guess, and decided she was supposed to be looking at the Trump-Russia issue, I guess, and she decided to do freelance investigation of Hillary Clinton instead. Why aren't they looking at Hillary Clinton? Okay, I will. That's what she said. A close associate of Donald Trump's former national security advisor, Michael Flynn, is a spy, arranged a covert investigation into Hillary Clinton's use of a private email server when she, that meaning Hillary Clinton, not Barbara, was Secretary of State, and through intermediaries turned to a person with knowledge of the dark web. Although really dark web, probably you want to go with this one. I don't know. You make the call. All right, that one probably needs a little more volume too. We'll turn that one up for next time. Anyway, Flynn, a retired 3-star general and spy who led chants of lock her up at last year's Republican National Convention, now 2 years ago, is a central figure in the FBI's investigation into whether the Kremlin worked with the Trump campaign to sway the U.S. election. Flynn is personally and ideologically linked to Barbara Ladine. She's that high in this article. A longtime conservative activist who works for the Republican Senator Chuck Grassley on the Senate Judiciary Committee. He is, in fact, the chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee, which is now investigating alleged links between the Trump campaign and Russia. But even more immediately, now is presiding over the Kavanaugh hearings. And who was Kavanaugh corresponding with about how those emails and other information was stolen from Democratic senators way back in the George W. Bush administration? Barbara Ladine. How weird. Ladine's husband, just to further complicate things, Ladine's husband, you may have heard of, is Michael Ladine, also a confidant of Flynn, and co-authored a book with him last year. That's of kind description of Michael Ladine. He is a neocon nut job whose own record of malevolent Republican activity takes him all the way back to being one of the primary architects of Iran-Contra. That's who we're talking about here. Flynn was forced to resign in February, just 24 days on the job, after just 24 days on the job as Trump's chief intelligence official at the White House, when it emerged that he had lied to Vice President Mike Pence about conversations he had with then Russian ambassador to the U.S., Sergei Kislyak. According to interview notes released by the FBI last year, Ladine decided in 2015 to launch her own investigation into Clinton's use of the server. At the time, she was a staffer on the Senate Judiciary Committee. According to the FBI files, Ladine wanted to determine whether the emails had been hacked by a foreign power because the incident angered her as a citizen and because she wanted to know whether such a hack would put her children, who served in the military, in danger. That is about as pretty a coat of lipstick as you can put on that pig, but that's pretty, as I'm concerned about. Won't somebody think about the children? That's really an amazing angle on the Hillary Clinton emails issue. But her emails, and I just want to look into it as a concerned citizen, and also because the children. Clinton's use of a private server was steeped in controversy throughout her unsuccessful presidential bid, but Ladine's concerns proved to be unfounded. Wow, who knew? A federal investigation found no evidence that the emails on Clinton's private server were ever compromised. Oh, well, so that didn't go well for her. That's true. I guess, though, I just want to, re-emphasize, if you will. I laughed at it before, but that she wants to hold an investigation to see whether the emails were hacked. But this puts a new projection angle on things. Hillary Clinton has to be guilty of something. Clearly her emails were hacked. I know her emails were hacked. I don't know it, but I assume that her emails were hacked. And I assume that because everybody hacks any Democratic servers they can get their hands on. After all, it was just a few years ago when my friend Manny Miranda hacked the Democratic servers at the Judiciary Committee, where I worked. Gee whiz, I wonder how hard the hacking was. By the way, did she just wander through their offices and, like Ferris Bueller style, look at the password that was written down at the desk and pass it on to Manny Miranda? Did Manny do it himself? I don't know. But she obviously is convinced that there was hacking going on because all Democratic servers are hacked by Republicans. That's what we do. I know we will find this. This is a good investment of my money. Eventually, we'll get down to it. I'll blame it on Russians instead of Republicans, and we'll all be fine. Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We'll continue with the Guardian article, but it occurs to me as I was explaining my way out of out of our talking and into the last break, anyway, that I felt like it was another example of possible projection, that Barbara Ladine was so convinced that Hillary Clinton's emails had been hacked that she was willing to spend possibly her own money and possibly some other billionaire's money, conducting a private investigation in her spare time. And the reason she was probably so convinced that the emails had been hacked, you wonder about that, actually. I mean, does anybody ever ask, why were you so convinced that the emails had been hacked? I mean, is it because you thought that if you were able to prove it, it would be such a bombshell that it was well worth the risk? That's a possible explanation. But given the frequency with which people confuse Hillary Clinton's emails and the private server with the server at the DNC, which was hacked, which led to the revelation of John Podesta's emails, and I'm sure several others. That's the one who comes to mind most frequently. And there were two very separate, they were separate servers and they're sort of separate issues, but they get conflated. They were sort of discovered and inflated into stories at about the same point. And of course, it happened at a moment when sensitivities were high among Bernie Sanders supporters, who actually at first probably, and maybe still do, welcomed the hacking of the DNC servers because it would provide fodder for their belief that the nominations process was unusually and improperly rigged against their preferred candidate. And I say it that way because to some extent all nominations processes are, I guess, for lack of a better term, are rigged in a way, but I mean, sort of like you rig them by working hard to corner the market in, useful endorsements and giving yourself the most advantageous arrangements possible with respect to financing. And that's a gentle way of putting it. And it may or may not be something that Bernie Sanders would have engaged in had he been attuned to that being the way things sometimes work, or whether it's simply, I would never do that and that isn't the way things should work. And I guess ideally it isn't. But Well, I will say this. Whoever did the hacking of the DNC server did either plan brilliantly or happen to stumble brilliantly into a very unique moment in time where Republicans would be insisting that Hillary Clinton's emails were hacked because they believe that all Democratic emails are hacked, and they know this because they hack them. And and being able to conflate that with having seen the Russians do the hacking, I presume, in the case of the DNC. But one of the things Republicans need in order to hack a server is knowledge of the existence of that server so that they can and find it and go and get it. And it's not entirely clear that they were ever aware of the existence of the private server and so never thought to hack it. Also, my guess is that the hacking of the DNC server and the server at the Senate Judiciary Committee was less about, brilliant sleuthing or mastery of the technology involved that enabled people almost as if by magic to penetrate the defenses of the DNC and or the Senate Judiciary Committee, but instead is, like most hacking, just sort of run-of-the-mill garbage that you lay a trap out for somebody and they jump into it with both feet because people are too trusting and or stupid or, some combination of both, or distracted if you don't like the word stupid. So, for instance, we know with respect to the hacking of the DNC that it was just response to phishing emails. You find out that, you know where the DNC servers are. You know what the DNC email tags are. You know who works there. So you just email people known to work there using their proper designation on the email servers, however they do things over there, John_Podesta or J Podesta, whatever, at DNC DNC.org, I guess they use. I have no idea. Anyway, once you've got those things, you send a bunch of phishing emails trying to get people to click on something that will install malware or steal their password or what have you, or you tell them, you send them those phishing emails. Your Gmail has been compromised. Enter a new, enter your password so that we can process the security measures, yada, yada, whatever dumb crap you make up. And if somebody is foolish enough or distracted enough to say, oh no, my Gmail has been compromised and Google is asking me to give them my current password, and what's the harm in that? They're Google. They already have my password. Here you go. And then boom, the server has been quote unquote hacked. It hasn't been hacked. You gave your password out. I mean, I guess that counts as hacking, but nothing super sophisticated actually happened. And that didn't happen with Hillary Clinton's private email server because knowledge of it remained private. No one ever found out about it and was able to, or at least was able to successfully spearfish Hillary Clinton or anybody. You don't have any idea who's on the server. Hillary obviously is, presumably Bill, Chelsea. I don't know who else. Who else could possibly? Maybe Podesta has an email there too. We don't know. They had nothing to go on and no knowledge of it, and so they couldn't. And there's a far more limited number of people that you could attempt to spearfish. And it only takes just one to fall for it, but you can find one or two in 100 or 200 people who work at the DNC versus, the 4 or 5 or dozen or so that might have had emails on Hillary Clinton's private server. And, you're just not fishing among enough people to get someone to bite. Anyway, same thing I would imagine probably happened with the Senate Judiciary Committee's servers, whether it was simply walking in and finding the password somewhere or spear phishing with that too. It's just curious. And I guess in my comments on our way out to the last break, I mentioned, what about if, I just speculate, what about had Barbara Ladine gone on no pun intended, a fishing expedition trying to find out whether or not Clinton's emails had been hacked, purely on the suspicion that they must have been hacked since Republicans, to her knowledge, had already hacked the DNC servers, and she was aware of their having hacked the Senate Judiciary Committee, and who knows how many other committees along the way. So obviously it was hacked, because I don't really understand what hacking is. I don't do the hacking. I just heard that somebody else successfully pulled it off. I figured they were technological whizzes, and so there would be no barrier to their being able to hack Hillary Clinton's emails, even if you didn't know where the server was, because I don't understand how that stuff works. So she jumps in and says, I'll find it. And if it was hacked by Republican staffers, well, I speculated. What if they thought, we can always blame it on someone else, like maybe Russia or some 400-pound guy? Except it turns out that the Russians were more adept at this stuff, perhaps, than any of us knew. Or maybe she did know it. I don't know. Maybe she got, it doesn't say anywhere where the information originally came from. We know that it was stolen, but we don't know who stole it. They blamed Manny Miranda for it, but we don't know if he did the work. But wouldn't it be something to find out? Of course, he'll never testify to it, but wouldn't it be something to find out that he had Russian help even that early? I don't know if that was going on over there, whether in 2001, 2002, 3, 4, there was sufficient reason to believe that the Russians were operating in that way, but I'd be curious to know. Anyway, I think it really says more about Ledine's expectation that there was a Clinton email hacking story to be had. She must have been shocked to find out that it hadn't happened. Well, it all fell apart, and I hope they burned a lot of money on it. Anyway, as we left off in reading before the break, Clinton's use of a private server was steeped in controversy, right? And it all comes to naught because it turns out that there's basically now at least no evidence that the emails on Clinton's private server were ever compromised. Now, Ledine's name, the Guardian article from, October 2017, goes on to say, Ledine's name was redacted on the FBI documents describing the investigation, which were released last year in response to a Freedom of Information Act request. But a person who reviewed the unredacted documents confirmed to The Guardian that Barbara Ledine was the subject. Was it the subject, or would we say she was the writer or recipient of the emails? I don't understand why is Ledine the subject. I think that's the wrong thing to say there. Her involvement was also confirmed by the Senate Judiciary Committee, though, in response to The Guardian's questions. So that solves that issue. According to FBI notes, Ledine wanted to pursue her own investigation in 2015 into whether or not Clinton's emails had been compromised, but could not finance the work. She sought out the help of an unnamed defense contractor and also turned to, you'll like it, Newt Gingrich, the former Republican Speaker of the House, for help. According to the FBI notes, Gingrich, quote, wanted to speak to others about the project, unquote, and asked Judicial Watch, the conservative activist group, for financial assistance. So as early as 2015, Newt Gingrich, too, is already working on trying to, well, he would say, finance an investigation into whether or not Hillary Clinton's emails were hacked, and or hack Hillary Clinton's emails, I'm sure. Judicial Watch, and that's not just speculation. Remember, well, it's coming up here in the article. But you might say, well, you're making a speculative leap there. It's not quite proven here, and it isn't, that Newt Gingrich was in for a penny, in for a pound. Either I will help finance an investigation into whether or not she was hacked, or I would also finance an operation that would hack her so that we could say she was hacked. We could prove that her email server was vulnerable by hacking it. That is an option. Anyway, Judicial Watch allegedly turned to another unnamed contractor who was familiar with the deep web and dark web. It's now there's a deep web as well. So this, according to the FBI's files, they were going to turn to a contractor familiar with the deep web and dark web. The internets. Is it on the Google? Are you on the line? Can we find out? The parties were concerned about what they would do if they came across any emails that contained classified information. According to the FBI investigation, the project was later halted. It's an interesting concern. What should we do if we come across emails that contain classified information? That could happen in the course of an investigation into whether or not someone else had ever done any hacking. For instance, if you found somebody who said, oh yeah, Clinton's email server was hacked. Really? What evidence do you have? Well, here are some of those emails. And they dump them into your desk and you're like, oh God, they're filled with classified information. Now I could possibly be in trouble. Or that concern could arise if you were interested in, say, I can't find any evidence on the deep web and dark web of whether or not Hillary Clinton's email server has ever been hacked, but I can provide you proof that it's hackable by hacking it. Of course, that might land some confidential or classified information in your lap. Are you worried about that? That would be another way to arrive at the same concern. In June, oh, wait a second, hold on, before we go on, the deep and dark web, yada, yada, and according to the FBI, the project was later halted. The incident and web of relationships is important for two reasons, and I would now argue three reasons. The Guardian is about to give you two reasons why Barbara Ladine's relationship with Mike Flynn, Newt Gingrich, Judicial Watch, and her interest in Hillary Clinton's email server is important for two reasons. The third reason is that it is also revelatory with respect to Brett Kavanaugh's long history of being involved in exactly these kinds of capers. But in their view, the first reason it's important is because Ladine is the second person with ties to Flynn who allegedly sought to investigate Clinton's use of a private server, is the way they put it here in the article, in an unofficial capacity. In June, a former British intelligence official named Matt Tate said, and we read this, that he had been approached by a longtime Republican operative called Peter Smith, who had a history of seeking damaging material about the Clinton family and was known for his close ties to Gingrich. Once again, Gingrich somehow figures in the middle of two, along with Mike Flynn, the notorious spy who has pled guilty to criminal charges at this point. There's another person who is connected to two attempted private investigations into the Clinton email server. One is, one's Mike Flynn, and I guess, how do you even enter into this sentence now? I can't even remember how we put this, but there are two different efforts, and Mike Flynn is connected to both, and I guess is Ladine connected to the two of them, or let's see, is it just Flynn? So Matt Tate is connected to the Peter Smith one. Smith was convinced as well that Clinton's private server had been hacked by a foreign power, probably Russians, Tate said, and it's not clear whether Ladine believed that they had been hacked by a foreign power or whether she just believed that it was likely that a foreign power had also hacked them because obviously Republicans were hacking them. So how hard could it be? Smith, who died at the age of 81, 10 days after giving his own account to the Wall Street Journal, which was weird, told the newspaper he had operated independently of the Trump campaign. He allegedly told Tate that he had been approached by a person on the, once again, dark web who claimed to have a copy of emails from Clinton's server and wanted help validating their authenticity. According to Tate's account, Smith claimed to be working with Flynn, who at the time was serving as a foreign policy advisor to Donald Trump's presidential campaign. Ladine's involvement is also important because she works on the Senate Judiciary Committee, which, at least at the time, was conducting an investigation into the Trump campaign. Her family's relationship with Flynn raises questions about whether Ladine could be wielding influence over the investigation. Grassley's spokesman said that Ladine's 2015 inquiry had not been authorized by the Judiciary Committee and that the committee had only learned of it after it had been completed. She was instructed not to do any further follow-up once the committee learned of her involvement, the spokesman said. The proper response, of course, is to fire her miserable ass, but they can't do that because she's too connected. Congressional investigators do not have the power of the FBI and federal prosecutors to bring criminal indictments, but they can compel witnesses to testify publicly and under oath, and can potentially play an important role in setting the groundwork for impeachment proceedings against the president. Grassley, and this was in 2017, mind you, Grassley has several important decisions to weigh in how his investigation will proceed, including whether to call the president's son, Donald Trump Jr., to testify publicly about a 2016 meeting he attended with Russians. A Grassley spokesman told The Guardian that Barbara Ladine was a part-time staffer in the Judiciary Committee in the Judicial Nominations Unit. And that was probably true because, as we know, in her capacity in the Judicial Nominations Unit, she was conspiring with Brett Kavanaugh and Manny Miranda to steal information from off of the servers of the Senate Democrats there. So this is interesting because this is sort of compartmentalized. Back in October 2017, the concern was, well, she's a well-known outside conservative operative. Isn't it possible that given her interest in privately financing and conducting an inquiry into Hillary Clinton's email server, that she might influence the Trump-Russia investigation Grassley was leading in his capacity as chairman of the Judiciary Committee? And the answer was, oh, no. You don't need to worry about that. She's sort of sequestered from that work. She works over on the judicial nomination side, where she has already been busted as having been involved in hacking Democratic servers for political intelligence to use for partisan and campaign gain. So she couldn't possibly pose a problem. She's on the other side where they've already stolen emails, you see. But they, in 2017, weren't able to put that together. So that was by way of excuse. Don't worry about Barbara Ladine. She's in the Judicial Nominations Unit. Those people steal emails, not us. He said Ladine was in no way connected to the investigations team and would not have access to any of its materials, unless, of course, she hacked them or had someone else do it. Senator Grassley has no relationship with Barbara's husband and wouldn't recognize him if he saw him, the spokesman added. Who cares? But probably not true. Ladine and her husband have been influential and controversial players in conservative circles in Washington for decades. And they put it this way. Michael Ladine, Barbara's husband, is a historian and former Reagan administration official who helped to develop the secret program to sell U.S. arms to Iran in the late 1980s. What? Yes, in what is known as the Iran-Contra affair. Neither Barbara nor Michael Ladine responded to requests for comment. Michael Ladine's daughter, Simone Ladine, formerly worked with Flynn in Afghanistan. Another curious connection, don't you think? An attorney for Flynn did not respond to a request for comment. Just thought I'd put that one out there on the record. By the way, like I said, Barbara Ladine, if you actually Google her up, you will find an awful lot about her involvement in Republican affairs and dirty ones at that for a very long time. Plus, the company she keeps is pretty unsavory all by itself and independent of what was reported in this article. So she was big in the Independent Women's Forum. Those of you involved in feminism and feminist issues very deeply will likely recognize that name. Good friends with a large circle of really odious Republican operatives, and good friends, as it turns out, with another couple of Barbaras here in the Northern Virginia area. Michael Ladine wrote a very pained and heartfelt, I'm sure for him, article a few days after September 11th, the September 11th, attacks in 2001, which killed his wife Barbara's good friend Barbara Olson, Ted Olson's wife. She was, of course, on the flight out of Washington, D.C., and was killed in the attack on the Pentagon. And he wrote up a piece back then, I think really just a couple of days after. Let me see if I can find it here. Ladine and Olson and he wrote a piece called "Who Killed Barbara Olson?" Which, of course, we know who killed Barbara Olson. It was the hijackers of the American Airlines flight. But P.S., years later, we find out that Donald Trump loves Saudis, even though the bulk of the hijackers were Saudis, and he, for some reason, does not include them on his abortive travel ban. But like I said, emotions are pretty raw here in this September 13th, 2001 piece, Who Killed Barbara Olson? Just wanted to kind of give you the opening couple of paragraphs. It'll be of interest to people here in Northern Virginia. Day before yesterday, he starts out, there were 3 Barbaras, close as sisters, joined by their zest for life, their volcanic passions, their total commitment to their loved ones, their fearless work for freedom. Okay, this is being published by AEI in the National Review Online. But okay. So who are the 3 Barbaras, closest sisters, joined by their zest for life, volcanic passions, total commitment to their loved ones, fearless work for freedom? Barbara Olson, who died, of course. Barbara Ladine, who we've been talking about. And just for out of interest for those of you in Virginia's 10th District, Barbara Comstock. All 3 chose to fight for their convictions. All 3 were singled out by the left for slanderous attacks, dehumanizing slogans, the usual stereotypes. This is, of course, again, being written by Michael Ledeen, notorious neocon and Iran-Contra figure. Had there been a feminist movement worthy of the name, they would have been its heroines. Instead, because they rejected the fashionable causes, insisted on traditional virtue, fought limits on real choices, and relentlessly exposed the emptiness of the leftist slogans, they became the feminists' targets. And the rest is him rending his garments about the unfortunate death of Barbara Olson. And you can give it a pass, given that it's written in September 13th, 2001. I just want to kind of throw that out there. Barbara Comstock, Barbara Olson, Barbara Ladine. Like I said, her roots go back pretty deep, and she's been involved in some of the most notorious dark operations among Republicans for a very, very long time. Not a tremendous surprise that if you find out that Brett Kavanaugh is receiving the stolen information, that Barbara Ladine is copied on the email. Anyway, much more to get to, but much less time than we thought in order to bring it forward. So we'll end things here, or start to wind things up anyway. Michael Musson had one comment we can kind of shoehorn in there, saying it would be super funny if, as a justice, Kavanaugh then recused himself on Trump questions. I mean, that would be super great if he did. It would be super ironic and super funny, because we would laugh, because we know how crazy that drives Donald Trump, that Jeff Sessions won't unrecuse himself, and he was angered by the fact that he recused himself in the first place. Imagine him recusing himself on the Supreme Court with a lifetime appointment. Now, why would he recuse himself? He probably won't, but why would he? Michael passes on the tweet of Mimi Rocha here, a former federal prosecutor in the Southern District of New York and a criminal justice fellow at Pace Law School and a commentator for NBC News, legal analyst, passing this on. The premise is that he's had discussions, Kavanaugh has, with someone at least connected to the president's legal team about the Mueller probe. That would have been the questioning that was put to him by Senator Harris the other day. So if he's had those connections, would he have to recuse himself? Well, it could require recusal under normal circumstances, but he might just ignore it, or more, depending on substance. We need to know more, and Senator Harris's "be careful how you answer" warning leads me to think more will be revealed. I certainly hope that's the case. There's a thread that goes with it. Perhaps that will explain what else she thinks might come of it. But you can, I don't know, if you were a betting person, perhaps you might bet that normal judicial canons of ethics would require a recusal, but he just won't do it, in the same way that Justice Scalia should have been required to recuse himself from questions in cases surrounding, for instance, his hunting partner Dick Cheney, but he just flat refused to do it. And it turns out there was really basically nothing anybody could do about it, because once you get your lifetime appointment, you're more or less unassailable unless you can get 67 senators on the same page and remove you from office. So, like we say, highly unlikely. All right, it's Friday. We're heading into the weekend. You'll have to depend on Justice Putnam and his fantastic production next in order to bring you up to date on any of the things I might have intentionally left out or just talked past. And you can usually depend on him putting a good show together for you in the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, which comes up next right here on Netroots Radio. Let's take a look at what he's got on tap for you. Good thing that South Korean trade agreement was stolen off Trump's desk, because otherwise we might have had a nuke attack we wouldn't have heard about until it was too late. Now, let's unravel that story. On the rest of his menu, the Trump administration says migrants are abusing legal loopholes that protect children, and that's why they want to withdraw from the Flores agreement. Oh, so they can jail kids longer in the gulags they've already paid for. Hey, it's a sunk cost, man. We got to use it for something. Emails released by Cory Booker and Mazie Hirono reveal Kavanaugh's troubling outlook on race as well. And thousands of Arkansas residents just lost their health coverage due to the state's draconian Medicaid work requirements. On the chef's table, there's a bit more. I'll preview that after this.
From Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Hey, look at this continuity between our shows once again. A new election is looming on the horizon, and Republicans have decided they are just fine with continuing to allow hackers to manipulate the political system. And why do all these daily caller reporters keep appearing on Russian propaganda channels? Interesting. We'll be back next week with more.